Back live with you tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Former Statistician General of South Africa, Dr. Pali Lehohla, says that the country is facing a serious shortage of skills, adding that this is constraining the journey out of poverty, inequality and unemployment. In his opinion piece, Dr. Lehohla, who's now Director of Economic Modeling Academy, says South Africa has been very slow in expanding the size of institutions of higher learning so that no one is left behind. He joins us to expand a bit on his opinion piece on what is lacking within the system. Dr. Lehohla, thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight on In Focus.
Thank you very much, Dede.
Are skilled black South Africans really in the minority? And if so, why? Because, for example, when we speak of occupying the position of CEO in state-owned entities, you generally hear black professionals saying, well, there is no shortage of black talent. They don't understand, for example, why would President Cyril Ramaphosa agree to the appointment of the likes of Andre Director when they are capable black professionals who can occupy those positions. What is the state? What is the situation? Are black professionals still underrepresented, particularly in those areas, managers, professionals, technicians?
Well, I mean, there are two ways which are complementary to measure level of skill. The one is based on numerical preponderance, that is just the absolute numbers. The other is the proportion of skilled people within that population group that are skilled and in employment. Amongst blacks, for those who are 15 years to 24 years, the number in 1994, the proportion in 1994 was 14%. Over a period of 30 years, that proportion has reduced to 9%. For those who are 25 to 35 years old, that proportion has remained at less than 17%. For those who are my age, which is 60 and above, that proportion has increased from about where it was at 20%, 17% to about 25%. Compare that to whites who were about 40% at that age group of 60 to 55 to 64. That proportion has increased to close to 70%. For those who are 15 to 24, that proportion is 3 times that of blacks at 35%. Amongst Indians, almost the same. So a nation cannot improve its wealth when the proportions are so low, including when they are actually regressing at that age of 15 to 24.
How do you explain that concept? Why are patterns of skilled labor differing based on racial groupings?
Well, it's a historical situation. It's a historical endowment that we got as black people and as colored people. But in the main, it is the amount of resources and how it is deployed that accelerates those proportions. For instance, the proportion of Indians in that age group has actually accelerated since 1994. And amongst whites also accelerated, but amongst blacks and Indians it stagnated. Why? Because, and it's not because blacks are not performing academically. If you look at the 70s and the 80s when there were fewer blacks, of course, going to university, all of them who went actually progressed and passed. Why? Because they were fully financed in terms of education.
Yeah.
Amongst blacks now, there are quite a number that go to university, 100,000 go to university, but very few of them actually progress through the classes in time of 4 years. They go up to 8 years, others drop out. So when you look at the graph of blacks in terms of that progression, whilst it was almost at par with whites, although the levels were lower, but at par in terms of improvement, now it is actually declining. In those years, for every one black person that qualified, 1.1 whites qualified in that group. Now, for every one black person that qualifies, there is a 6 white people that qualify. So the graph of the blacks is going down amongst whites, and it is a factor of financing of at higher education. In my submission to the Higher Commission on Fees Must Fall, I was arguing that finance everyone. Don't nitpick, because by nitpicking, you are creating problems, and particularly amongst blacks, particularly where the children are of a single mother. By the way, I have to include a statistic here which is very interesting that needs to be understood. 62% of fathers say they are married against 38% of mothers. And that means if they claim that, it means they have conjugal rights and they have rights to children. Yet, in 62% of the birth certificates, only in all the birth certificates, only in 38% does the name of the father appear. In 62, it doesn't. So now you have these schizophrenic men that claim conjugal rights and children's rights to mothers, yet their names don't even appear on the birth certificate. And when they have to pay fees, they don't. So this nitpicking that we make in terms of financing children when they go to school victimizes both mothers and the children. That's the central thesis of my paper or my article, that by victimizing these people, we are creating a lot of problems. And that's why we are seeing lack of rise in skills. So finance everyone, don't victimize.
Challenge number 2, though, that you're pointing out is the artificial scarcity. University enrollment, government says, will, or at least they've set themselves a target of 1.5 million by 2030. We have seen an improvement in access to higher education, especially when we're talking black students. Do you think that 1.5 million by 2030 is a realistic goal, considering that we still have only 26 universities, at least in the country?
Well, it's impossible in terms of enrollment of freshmen or fresh women. In that, of the 300,000 that may qualify to go to university, there are only 160,000 spaces at university. So the scarcity is artificial in that instead of going on an aggressive expansion of admission, expansion of facilities at higher education, we have constrained those. So we can't build skills. There are these two things that are going against each other. First is not funding everyone. Second is not increasing the space for enrollment at higher education, university in particular.
What about then this challenge that, because a large number of the challenges that you're raising are true, financing a major challenge, white males being dominant at postgraduate studies because black students can't afford, as supposed to be able to do that, and hence you're saying the funding needs to go up. But there's a question around underrepresentation in science, engineering, technology, as well as business and commerce programs. Is that your experience?
Yes, indeed. The numbers do reflect that. And in good part, you have to look at the history here. And it is the demutualization of Old Mutual and the other life company. At the same time, it has been the degeneration in the school system. What happened in the 1980s was that through that program of demutualization, most of those people who could count or add and subtract, mathematicians, were the ones that were recruited from the school system to be agents of insurance companies. And these people left the school system, which was broken. And when you look at the levels of unemployment at the moment of those people who could still teach, the majority of them are those who have these subjects of mathematics. Because of computerization, now you don't need a person walking around selling insurance or demutualizing or registering people for demutualization. You do it online. But those people now are actually unemployed. When you look at these people by qualification, you find that indeed those who were in the natural sciences, including mathematics, are now facing the wrath of unemployment. So there are so many things that are happening in society. And if we don't pay attention to what the numbers tell us, we will actually not answer or address the problem appropriately. Unfortunately, our systems of planning hardly ever look at statistics.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
So let's talk then about solutions to deal with this crisis. Are the financial models currently being discussed viable? I mean, of course, we've set this threshold of 600,000 and below to be funded. Again, there's a means test, which you are also questioning in terms of policy, what that means test actually means. But there's also a model that says, well, institutions of finance must then be able to finance the missing middle, while those who are able to pay must pay.
No, that's nonsensical, I must say. It's nonsensical. It doesn't, that approach fails to understand where South Africa is. By the way, we have to build a nation. And one of the key missions of building a nation is to do so through education. And the one cohort of people that will spend a lot of time together is these ones who go to university for 4 years at least. They'll be together. If you pay for all of them, then their agenda must be education. And that agenda must also be, and we must demand that, tell us what South Africa you wish in exchange for paying for everyone. When you start dividing them by saying those who pay for themselves or don't pay for themselves, you destroy the DNA of creating a different South Africa, a new South Africa. So that model is nonsensical, is short-term, it is driven by ignorance at best, because you need to build a nation, and that nation you have to build by financing everyone, poor and rich, multimillionaires, all together. You pay for all of them. You tax us who work and use that tax to pay for these people. Any other retards the progression, retards in the nation-building exercise, which students should take as their national agenda. You cannot have a social compact when you separate the student body by those who are rich or poor. You reinforce the divisions, and you will never achieve social compact if you approach these things that way. The historical moment of South Africa is one that says, finance everyone, charge the universities by saying, ask the students, every year they must write an assignment of 2 pages or 3 pages, and across years of enrollment to define for us what future South Africa they are looking for. That is the seed for social compacting. It's not the flag that we put. It's not bringing people together in the way we do. It doesn't work. You need to deal with it at the university level, because that's where you have the elite. And you hope that by doing so, you will remove the elitist notion that may emerge. At the moment, we are actually producing elitists and not the elite and the leadership that can understand the challenges of South Africa and resolving them.
Dr. Pali Lehohla,
it's absolutely nonsensical.
Let's leave it there. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time. Reflections there of Dr. Pali Lehohla, Director at the Economic Modeling Agency, saying pay for everybody. That's part of social compacting, but also it guarantees access for everyone and bringing the skills that we need to grow this economy. Bye.